Good afternoon, everyone. I pray that your Tuesdays was filled with places and spaces of joy, of peace, possibly happiness, maybe a time where you could just cut loose, let it all hang out, and just be your authentic self. Now, you may have done that in the shower when no one was watching. You may have done it when you knew you were completely alone. You may have done it in the company of others, but I pray that you had an opportunity to just let go and to just drop your shoulders, reduce some of your stress, and just exhale. So we have been talking about toxic relationships, building our way up to it, but we're first looking at unhealed childhood trauma and how that looks now as an adult. And today we're talking about fear of abandonment. If you have read my book, you know that I definitely had abandonment issues. I did not grow up with either one of my parents until, for one, teenage years, and the other I didn't even meet until I was in my early 20s. I lived with different relatives, and as a child, my goal was to always just to be able to stay in one house with one grouping of people and not have to leave. And you may think, well, they were making her leave because she was a bad kid. Nope. I was really quiet. I kind of stayed out the way. But what I didn't understand was that there were other things that were impacting the households I was in. But as a kid, all I knew was I felt unwanted. I felt unloved, and that's what I really craved. And some of you may be able to not necessarily relate to the moving with different households, but just the feeling as a child of feeling unwanted, or maybe feeling unloved, or maybe not feeling safe, or maybe not really sure if your caregivers, if your parents are really going to have your back, if they're really going to protect you. They may have threatened you with, if you keep doing so and so, when I was growing up, they say, if you keep doing so, I'm going to send you to reform school, or whatever. So whatever impacts our fear of abandonment as children, when we become grown, we bring that same fear with us. And what does that look like in relationships? Well, in relationships, it could look like being very needy, very needy, demanding of your partner that if they don't call you or text you at least once an hour or throughout the day, then your anxiety begins to raise because you begin to tell yourself stories about worst case scenarios. They don't love me anymore. They don't care anything about me. Why? Because I didn't hear from them all morning. Now, it doesn't matter that your partner, your spouse has a job, has other obligations. Your fear of abandonment kicks in. Your fear that you may not be deemed as worthy. And you begin to really stress out if you haven't heard from them. In the same sense, of fear of abandonment will have you make also other unrealistic expectations of the loved ones in your life. And I'm not just talking about your partner or your spouse. I'm talking about family members. I'm talking about possibly your parents. I'm talking about your children. Needing to know where the people in your life is at all times, getting really upset if you feel like you have been left out of something. If someone doesn't agree with you, this is a big one. If someone doesn't agree with you, you automatically interpret it as they must be against me, and therefore I have a fear that they will abandon me. And so your response may be one or two things. You may fight to try to stay connected, to try to make them want to see if you can make them reassure you that you are wanted, that you are needed, that you are loved. Or another response is that you just kind of become somewhat of a nuisance, or you begin to people please. You begin to try to do everything you can. You put up with situations that really do not benefit you. You don't necessarily have boundaries. All this stuff is connected, if you're hearing, because of your fear of being alone, a fear of being abandoned, or feeling like you're being abandoned. And that can be quite problematic. I want to go back over something I said. Cannot tolerate when someone has a difference of opinion or someone gives you constructive criticism, because you're not hearing it as constructive. You're not hearing and honoring that that other person may have their own opinion. What you're feeling is that if they don't agree with me, then they must not be with me, and therefore there's a possibility that they're going to abandon me. And I need you all to know, if you suffer from a fear of abandonment, when those feelings begin to generate inside of you, it can become overwhelming. It can become overwhelming. So instead of being able to say to the person, you know, the reason why I'm asking you to call me constantly is because, you know, I have some abandonment stuff from my childhood and I'm really trying to work through it, and I'm not really trying to be a nuisance, but, you know, I'm asking you, please work with me on this, and I'm going to do some work on my part. Instead of saying something, and you all may say, I don't use those words, but, you know, you could put in your own framework. My point is, instead of owning where you are, what may happen is you lash out. What may happen is you create scenarios in your head that support your belief that this person is making you feel unworthy, that supports your belief that this person doesn't care about you, that supports your belief that you are going to be abandoned. And as you begin to, in 12-step programs, they talk about, they call it, and I'm fledging a little bit, like stinking thinking. It is a saying in Narcotics Anonymous that says an addict by himself is in bad company. Because when you're by yourself, and you know, for anybody who has these negative, self-fulfilling thoughts, you begin to have those thoughts, you begin to feel like you're being abandoned, you begin to find things to justify why you feel like that, even if it's not true, even if it's not real. You begin to do that, and before you know it, you have this whole scenario that's only really real in your head, and you choose not to, and that's the interesting piece. Your anxiety is so high, I'm not going to say you choose not to, your anxiety is so high that you're not even able to check in with the other person to see if what you're feeling resembles the truth at all, and so you act out. And so when those types of scenarios happen, it's definitely difficult to maintain healthy relationships. You know, if we talked about yesterday, living on high alert, if we don't trust people and we are fearing that they're going to abandon us, they kind of put you between a rock and a hard place. And it makes it difficult for people who really may want to be in relationship with you, who may really want to share their lives with you, but the cost may become too high for them. The cost of trying to make sure that all of your needs are met may cause them to kind of neglect some of their own needs, or may cause them to, if they're not necessarily as emotionally mature as they may need to be, they may begin to act out. And so now you have one person acting out from their place of hurt, and one person responding from their place of hurt, and you have one big mess. So my invitation to you is, if you still struggle with a fear of abandonment, if you still struggle with feeling like, you know, you may not be good enough, and you're trying to hold on to your relationships, and you become smothering, you become overbearing, what can you do about that? Well, the first thing to do is just acknowledge, this is where I find myself, and this is why I find myself there. You may need to engage in some therapy where you are honestly talking to your therapist about what's happening. You can also begin to ask yourself some questions that I have mentioned in other videos. If this is the situation that I'm dealing with, if I'm feeling like I'm being abandoned, what is the evidence that supports that? And what's the evidence that doesn't support it? I remember I was in a relationship, this was early in the relationship, and the person who I was in a relationship with liked to shop. And I really don't, so it's kind of like opposites. You know, usually women are the shoppers and men are not, but he liked to shop. And early in the relationship, when I first met him, we were getting together. and kind of had decided we were going to be together. He had said he was going shopping, like to this, a store, whatever, Target, Kmart, whatever. And it was gone for an hour. Then 1 hour turned to 2, and I think it was turned to 3. Well, how many of you know that after an hour, my anxiety began to raise? And after 2 hours, I was sure that he was probably with some other woman. And by it was coming to 3 hours, by the time he connected back with me when we had agreed to or reached out, I was furious. But under that anger was the little girl who was feeling like she was going to be abandoned. I didn't have enough emotional tools back then to be able to say, when this happens, when you do this, this is what I'm experiencing. I didn't have enough emotional tools back then to begin to work on myself. All I knew to do was to lash out. And so I invite you, again, if this is something that you resonate with, when you find yourself beginning to experience a fear of being abandoned, a fear of being left alone, a fear of being left out. And I'm going to say this really, really quick. Some of you came to this because you were bullied as children. Now, I know when I was growing up, the bullies just came with the neighborhood. But as time has gone on, they become a lot more sophisticated. They cyberbully. But it doesn't matter if it happened in the 60s or if it happened in the 2000s or 2010s or if it happened yesterday. Bullying, particularly when it's done to a young kid who's really trying to conform, trying to fit in, can leave long-lasting marks and scars. And unfortunately, we bring those into our adult relationships. So again, ask yourself, what is the evidence to support this feeling that I'm having that's making me so angry? Am I really being abandoned? What's the evidence that supports that? Does this person have a history of abandoning me? Or what is the evidence that does not support it? Well, they pretty much always do what they say they're going to do. He said when he went shopping, he came back with bags, and I learned, and I knew sort of from experience of having been shopping with him that he is a meticulous shopper, and it does take time because he compares and all those types of things. And so I invite you again to like and share this video, which I rarely ever remember to say, but you all have been doing it for me, so thank you so much. For those who have liked the page, I really appreciate it. I'm also on Instagram and on YouTube. And so today, what I would ask you to do with intention is to share the videos. To share the videos with someone who you believe these videos may bless, because the whole idea is to help so that all of us can come to a place of healing and restoration, and so that all of us can come to a place of peace. We don't want to keep this goodness to ourselves, but we want to be able to share so that as we are healing, others can heal. Love you all, and I will talk with you tomorrow. Bye-bye.